Please welcome APTA Chair Nuria Fernandez and APTA President and CEO Paul Skoutelis.
Welcome to this concurrent session, Congress and the Year Ahead in Transportation. I am Nuria Fernandez, the APTA Chair, and it is my great pleasure to introduce the Chairman of the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, Peter DeFazio. Chairman DeFazio has served as a member of this House committee since he was elected to Congress in 1986. So that's about 33 years. I know this because that's the year that my youngest was born. He is a true leader on transportation issues and has worked tirelessly to boost infrastructure spending, including investments in public transportation. He has served as chairman or ranking member of 4 of the 6 transportation and infrastructure subcommittees, including the Highways and Transit Subcommittee. Over the past decade, Chairman DeFazio has taken a lead role in drafting and negotiating several multi-billion-dollar surface transportation bills, including the FAST Act in 2015, which provided $305 billion in funding for highways and transit infrastructure. He understands that robust investment in a multimodal transportation system is essential to retain our global competitiveness. With the FAST Act expiring this next year, we know that Chairman DeFazio will work diligently with his committee members on both sides of the aisle to ensure the necessary investments are made in public transportation so we can improve our public transit systems for today and in the future. We look forward to working with him every step of the way. The chairman has graciously agreed to take questions from the audience after his remarks. So without further ado, please give a warm welcome and a round of applause to Chairman Peter DeFazio.
Well, that's a happier, younger me with the mustache there, but here I am today. It is good to be here. It's good to be anywhere but Washington, D.C. these days, so thanks for having me. It gave me a good excuse to be out of that town. Well, I just came from the West Coast. Despite the turmoil, I do have hope that we can still move on a transformative 21st century surface transportation bill. Much of what we've done in the past has really just been iterations of the Eisenhower plan. Now, that was an incredible gift to the nation, and then transit, of course, was added in during the Reagan administration. A lot of the base policies haven't changed very much over that time, and it is time now to look forward into the 21st century and have a reauthorization bill that moves us in that direction. Defossilization of transportation being the largest single contributor to carbon pollution in the United States, building and rebuilding a system that will be resilient. We'll be using new materials for much of it, and transit is going to play an absolutely key role in my authorization. Now, I'm not going to give you a top line number today, but I do know that you have about a $100 billion backlog just to bring transit up to a state of good repair, which is critical. You lose riders when you lose dependability. You all know that. They can't afford to go to the transit stop, whether it's bus rapid transit, light rail, and then be told, oh, sorry, it's broken down. You're going to have to take this bus or go this other way. And people, their lives are too hectic. So bringing it up, what we have up to a state of good repair is critical, and that'll be a critical part of the bill. But also building out new and innovative transit options for people to build more ridership and help people to get out of their single occupancy vehicles. It's been, I can't even exactly remember, I guess it would have been back around safety the last time that Democrats held the pen when we were drafting a surface transportation bill. It would have been very early in my career. You've had, over the last couple of decades, a lot of status quo funding. You've had proposals on the other side of the aisle, one of my former chairmen, to actually eliminate transit funding. That didn't go very far. And then a lot of efforts to make it transit cheaper, not better. resistance to fixed route transit. Those days are gone in this bill, I'll tell you. Now, I'll tell you a little bit about what I want to do. Obviously, we have to better align federal law to serve the interests of the rider. There are impediments in your authorizations and statute that actually do that. And, you know, one of the big issues is frequency. You know, longer people have to wait, more likely they're going to divert and not take the transit. So we have to make it help you with frequency. That needs to be a key part of what we're doing on your main routes. Ease of access. I flew into Newark last night and took PATH to get over here, and it was an interesting experience. If they hadn't had humans standing at the ticket machine, I probably would still be there trying to figure out how do I get to not Penn Station Newark, but Penn Station New York. And I still am not quite certain how it all worked, and then get down to the platform, and there were no like reader boards there to tell you, well, there's two tracks, which one? Well, you have to ask someone. And then finally the train comes and I could barely get in the door. So a little bit oversubscribed and a little bit, you know, not the most pleasant and easy experience. So some of what you need can be done by, you know, speeding up transit vehicles with bus lanes, signal priority, route optimization, and you need some help in dealing with the cities on that, and I intend to be providing them some incentives to do those things and better cooperate with transit agencies. Then I'm also supportive of expanding the STIC program, Small Transit Intensive Cities, which rewards smaller cities who provide great transit. As I said before, I'm happy to have any input on any of these. I was just handed by Ward McCarriger, who used to be my counsel for many years. He just handed me the position statement on reauthorization just before I came on stage, so I haven't read it yet. But hopefully we're in some significant agreement. I will read it on Amtrak down to DC tomorrow. You know, the Trump administration really delayed SIG grants for a couple of years, and it's taken actually an effort, and it's been supported on both sides of the aisle to get that program back on track. You know, it's better now, but the approval rate is still way too slow. And, you know, they're still discouraging really robust federal investment, and they're pushing for more local cost share beyond what the requirements are in law. We held a hearing last summer, and we documented all of the problems with the SIG grants since this administration took over. They would point to the ones that were, you know, like from the Obama era that get done quickly, but a lot of the things in their era are languishing. And I don't think it was the best day the acting administrator ever had. We found that it cost you about $845 million in delays for projects that were ultimately approved. That's obviously not acceptable since you don't have a lot of cash floating around to spare. And then I was also made aware by numerous agencies that you're being pressured by FTA to come in with a lower cost share. Now I confronted the acting administrator on that and said, will you sign New Start's full funding grant agreements that are above a 40% SIG cost share? And she, well, I guess she had to. She said yes. So if any of you are having trouble and they're trying to push that number up, get in touch with my staff and we'll go back and lean on them again. You know, and the SIG process itself is burdensome, and you know, it's like the State Department of Transportation doesn't have to demonstrate a lot to add highway capacity, and highway construction is eligible under core formula programs, and states move ahead on a reimbursement basis. Transit should be treated the same way. Therefore, I support, and this I guess is in your principles, your reauthorization principle to streamline the SIG approval process. And I think it's really important, you know, the FTA has to be certain that local project sponsors are building good transit projects. We don't want failures. But once we get to that point, let's get them built. Let's not drag our feet. I also want to provide for more transit-oriented development opportunities for transit agencies. I know you want to do smart planning and investment around stations to boost ridership, and I'm going to look for ways to provide incentives for that. Not to neglect buses. In the past, I've said that, we need to work together to find a solution for bus funding that works for all of you. In the House bill, you'll see a restoration of some of the bus funding cuts from past reauthorizations, and I want to establish a process where both large and small transit agencies are no longer competing against each other for scarce dollars. Your needs are vastly different, therefore you should each have your own pot of funds. Third, I'm looking for a streamlined bus procurement process that will incentivize agencies to minimize customization of buses, speed up the process of bus procurement. I want to make it easier to buy buses, and I want you to get more bus for every dollar you spend. And finally, I intend to end the FTA practice of withholding apportionments when Congress passes a short-term continuing resolution. FHWA FHWA has a process that allows state DOTs to still get highway funds, but why not transit? So we've got to fix that. And as many of you know, I strongly believe that federal tax dollars going into transportation should support American workers. I pushed for higher domestic content for rolling stock in the FAST Act. There were some at the time who said it's impossible, can't be done, can't get to 70. Well, we are going to get to 70, and we're going to keep going beyond 70 in a realistic way into the future. I don't want to overly burden transit agencies and manufacturers' extraneous bureaucracy. So the House bill will facilitate compliance with Buy America rolling stock requirements by allowing manufacturers to go directly to the FTA for certification instead of this two-step process and all the auditing and all the other problems that go on now. And then once they're established, then people can just buy them off the shelf. You're not going to have to go through that process for new acquisitions. And that also goes back to not too much customization. On the topic of innovation, it's really difficult, I know, for you to innovate with limited resources. And innovation, to sustain innovative projects requires dedicated money. And demonstration grants are not the best answer. So I'd like to mainstream innovation in this bill rather than spreading money around to a few demonstration projects. I believe we can allow transit agencies to incorporate mobility on demand concepts into everyday transit operations and make these activities eligible for federal funds. This will require establishing one set of federal rules that are technology neutral, protect the public interest, ensure open access to data, and incentivize single payment systems for consumer ease. Be happy again, any feedback you have on these particular programs so you can incorporate innovation. In Eugene, just a few days ago, they are operating an on-demand electric vehicles in the downtown area to 70 preset destinations, and they're very impressive. And thus far, the experiment seems to be going well. You want to be using these innovations to feed your networks. When I took the committee to Europe, in Berlin, the local transit folks, or it's the Metropolitan Transit, there had partnered with a company that designed an app, and anywhere in Berlin or the suburbs, it knows where you are and you click on where you want to go. It'll immediately give you, they were going to launch this in June, I was there in May. I assume it was successfully launched. It'll give you every potential option to get there, how long it'll take, how much it'll cost, and then any fares that are involved you can buy with one click. That's what we want to be doing everywhere, hopefully in the not too distant future. And then, climate emissions are, as I started and talking about a 21st century transportation bill that's transformative in many ways, one being to reduce carbon pollution, put us on track for, a fossil-free fuel future in transportation. 83% of greenhouse gas emissions are from passenger freight vehicles, and we've got to figure out how to do that. In transit, obviously, one solution that is being looked at today is electric buses, or in the case of some are using hybrids to reduce pollution, but also some are going all electric. We've got to continue to push forward with that. There will be issues in dealing with states and public utility commissions or whoever is the utility regulator in your state, because if you move to all electric, they're going to need to give you time of day pricing, which some states don't have or authorize. They're going to need to figure out how the substations that will be necessary to feed the electricity to your buses will be paid for, whether they go in the general rate base or whether it's something else. And I think if we make the transit agencies pay for them, that's going to really delay things and make it much less affordable. And again, I'm going to look at ways of incentivizing states to partner and work with transit agencies who want to go in this direction. I'm not choosing a technology at the moment. I'd say electric looks the most promising, but in Eugene, actually, my local utility district, we had a little demonstration this summer with a hydrogen car, and we have surplus renewable electricity in the Northwest. In fact, my local utility just had to pay a lot of money to get out of a wind contract because they didn't have anything to do with the power. But what they're thinking of doing now is, it's a very simple device that we saw there, is cracking water to produce hydrogen with basically free power, surplus power, and you're creating a totally sustainable fuel source. And so there's a question, and California, of course, is looking both at hydrogen and electricity. We're not absolutely certain how to go, but distribution of hydrogen seems problematic. But I'm not going to choose a technology, not going to force you to choose a technology, but we want to move in that direction, and I look forward to working with you as we confront all these new challenges. So thanks very much for having me here today. I was told I would take some questions, so I don't know if they have a microphone out there somewhere or not. I heard someone tapping.
Sure. Hi, my name is Marlene Connor.
Where are you, Marlene? I like to look at people who are asking questions.
Here, I'll be like this person in the
Oh,
middle
there
of
you
the
go.
room.
I see. Oh, yeah, good. You're like at a
Hello.
concert. Hold up your iPhone. That's good.
I'll be
Yeah.
this person.
Yeah.
Like an Uber. Question, Wednesday morning, the subcommittee on highways and transit is doing a hearing with transportation network companies. I wonder if you could tell us what the purpose of that committee meeting is going to be and how that kind of fits in with your notion of integrated mobility and transit.
Well, TNC's microtransit can play a key role. I'll give one. This is a somewhat dated example now, but it's interesting. When they built Brightline in Florida, when they started planning it, they thought, oh, we're going to have all these vans bring people in we're going to need to serve something that's about 4 miles wide in terms of the population base in order to pencil this thing out. And it took them like 8 years to do the project, and by the end of the project, they went, we don't need any vans. And what they do is have a single app purchase. You click where you are, and Uber or Lyft picks you up. You go to the station, same ticket. You get out in Miami, if that's where you're going. Your Uber or Lyft waits for you, and you move along. So these are very interesting developments, but there's a downside. In San Francisco, it's calculated that 50% of the new congestion is coming from Uber and Lyft. So we have to be, carefully approaching how we're going to integrate, TNC's microtransit into the system to, better utilize mass transit and not have unintended consequences. So that is going to be a major focus of the hearing. Unfortunately, we'll see what happens today, but I was told until last week Uber and Lyft were coming because I do have some issues with them, particularly the whole thing about 4 years ago I wrote to the CEOs and said, use fingerprint background checks. They're still not doing that. In my little city of Eugene, they did their background checks, and then the police, because they had a local licensing, which, by the way, they want to preempt local licensing. did fingerprint background checks, and came up with 1 murderer, 1 sexual predator, and 10 other felons. They've got to do better than they have been doing. And so there are issues like that need to be dealt with. And unfortunately, as of today, they're not going to be there, but I wrote them a somewhat warm letter today telling them what the results of them not showing up might be, which is we're going to legislate one way or another, and you can either be there and give your perspective or you can suffer the consequences. So it might be an interesting hearing.
Thank you.
Congressman Leanne Redden from the Regional Transportation Authority in Chicago. I'm here.
Yep, okay.
First of all, thank you for your leadership in everything you do. And secondly, thank you for letting us steal Ward. He is a great addition to...
Yeah, well, that wasn't a willing...
So maybe I shouldn't be saying thank you.
But he has to put his kids through college. I couldn't pay him enough.
Understood. We truly appreciate his support with us. This past weekend, we passed, as an association, our principles for guiding reauthorization. And spoiler alert, since you said you hadn't had a chance to read it yet.
Well, he handed it to me 10
He did, probably as you were walking onto stage.
Right.
But it's calling for a $145 billion investment into our infrastructure to get us to a state of good repair and support growing communities. But as we sort of take this to that next stage, and that's selling that to Congress and hopefully moving towards a reauthorization package, what advice do you give to us as we go to our delegations? How can we be most helpful to you and your colleagues as we're trying to advance these issues?
Well, try and nail them down on funding. You know, I keep pushing. I've proposed various ways to get there. I've had numerous meetings with Richie Neal, Chair of Ways and Means, and he wants to get to a big number. And just met recently with Speaker Pelosi, Leader Hoyer, and Richie to try and chart a path forward. There's obviously a lot of question about, well, who's going to support this if we fund it this way or that way. So, and as you meet with your members, say, look, you know, we need significant increase in investment. I mean, the current levels, you know, if we continue status quo on October 1st, funding will drop $7 billion, and then a year from October 1st, $17 billion a year. We're borrowing $17 billion a year to put into the inadequate spending of the Highway Trust Fund. Now, I can justify borrowing money to make capital investments. I mean, it's stupid we don't have capital budgets, but we don't. So it scores the same as anything else. So we have to find a way to pay for it on a sustainable basis. And we just need to be pushing everybody you meet with saying, okay, do you want to help if they're in an urban area? Do you want to bring your transit up to a state of good repair? Do you want to offer people new options? Yes. Well, how are you going to pay for it? What will you support as a pay for increases in transportation? If they're more suburban, you might take a slightly different approach, and obviously rural areas too. But you know, we've just got to nail people down that they're willing to go there. And you know, there's this myth that you know this will be a horrible thing, and politically. If you look all across America at all the states who've raised transportation investments in the last 5 years, with a large majority of the states, I can identify one elected official who's lost their office because of that. It was a state senator in California who Kevin McCarthy personally targeted and personally put a bunch of money into defeating, in addition to trying to repeal the California funding mechanism, and he got his head handed to him on that. I do not think it's politically risky. People are tired of congestion. They're tired of potholes. They're tired of being detoured. You know, they want the system fixed. And I don't think it's a risk. I just don't. And, you know, for just one more, I mean, you know, just for one heady moment, we thought we were headed there. We go to the meeting with Trump, and you know, it was pretty, I mean, first he went off on a couple of tangents, as he's wont to do, but once he came back around, and then we get back to transportation, he turned to the speaker and he said, well, Nancy, what are you thinking? And she says, well, Mr. President, I think we need at least $1 to $1.5 trillion for infrastructure. And he's like, no. 1.9. 1.9. No. 2. 2 sounds better. So he bid us up to $2 trillion. And then we said, okay. Then we said, but everybody has a different idea of what's infrastructure. And we said, what is it? And we agreed on it would be roads, bridges, highways, transit. It would be wastewater, be drinking water, and it would be broadband. And if we put $2 trillion into that, you know, we would deal with a heck of a lot of problems in this country and begin to look like other countries who have moved well into the 21st century. Fortunately, he made that offer when his acting chief of staff, Mick Mulvaney, founder of the Freedom Caucus, who doesn't believe in government, let alone federal investment in transportation, wasn't there. He dumped on it from California, and then he came back and he brought in Grover Norquist and all these other characters, and they talked the president down. So we've got a problem there. We've got a problem, obviously, with the Senate without the president. So, but we're still going to push ahead in the House.
Thank you.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, how are you today? Thank you for being with us.
All right.
Over here.
Okay, good.
All right, good to see you again.
They got this light shining right in my eyes.
Yes, it's okay. You're better off. So first of all, let's all give you a round of applause for your strong and unwavering commitment to public transportation. You clearly are one of the members who's by far one of the best influencers in terms of our industry, and we thank you for that. You just mentioned earlier that you have been talking to the chairman of Ways and Means in trying to get not only the revenue we need to sustain the levels that we have today, but also to get us in a position where we truly are leading the nation. So my question for you is, how do we as an industry support you in making the case to Ways and Means?
Well, Leanne just mentioned a number. I haven't seen that's in your document, and I think you'll be pleased with what we're going to propose. Richie realizes that we need to make a massive increase in investment. The question is, can we get it done? And I mean, it'd be simple if we had the House, the White House and the Senate, but we don't. So what is it we can get through the House that we might bring the Senate along with? I mean, the Senate, McConnell has said no gas tax, no diesel tax, and then Barrasso's in the same place. But there are other senators saying, well, how else are you going to pay for this? So I don't see a way in the short term. Long term, we're going to move to vehicle miles traveled, especially as more and more things become electrified. And I want to have a national pilot program for vehicle miles traveled here, and I would probably include current electric vehicles in that. But, but we have to have something much sooner and shorter term to begin to build toward that future. So, right now, that seems to me the best way to go. I'm open to any ideas. Richie seems to be open too. What I was given was the go-ahead to come up with a proposal that's transformative. Looking forward with a big number, and we're doing that. We're building it, and then I'm taking that number back to the leadership meeting, and we're going to try and figure out how we get there. So, people should just be in touch with Richie and members of that committee and talking about what's going to happen if we don't do it. I mean, my first hearing this year was the cost of doing nothing, and the costs are extraordinary if we don't make these investments. And they're scattered all around the country in terms of the costs. Texas Transportation Institute, the cost of wasted time, wasted fuel. Those are phenomenal numbers. The fact when you start zeroing in on individual projects, like last time I was here, I took Amtrak up from Washington, D.C. with the committee, and they had a little viewing car so we could see all of the best engineering work that had been done between 1872 and 1933. Unfortunately, it's wearing out. The tunnel under Baltimore, 1872, and by the way, when you go through it, it's pouring rain inside and it's brick. Now, that's not a really good sign. And then we got to the Portal Bridge. They hadn't opened it that day, so we could go over it. But when they open it for navigation purposes, and I'm working with the Coast Guard to limit when and if they will open that bridge, because once they open it, it takes 20 people and one really big guy with a sledgehammer to get it closed again. And of course, the project they've already got the local match, except this administration's trying to say, it's not a local match because you're using TIFIA funds. Well, I said, they've got to pay it back, and we make money on it. What's the difference? I said they should go to a bank and pay more interest and make it more expensive. And then they shut down one of the tunnels under the Hudson, and we went in there, and that's the knee walls are the improvement that were added in 33. Unfortunately, the salt water got into them. They have 12,000 volt cables, and every once in a while now they're spalling and blowing up. And if one of those tunnels goes down, that's $17 billion a year economic loss. Just one of those tunnels. It would cost $17 billion today to rebuild those, to build 2 new tunnels and then go back and rebuild those tunnels. So we would have actually excess capacity into the future. So it's stupid if we don't make these investments, and you just have to make that case to every member of Congress. The longer you wait, the more expensive it is. If you don't go out and repair a bridge today, it goes to full failure, 10 times more money. Or even if it goes to more partial failure, it's geometric. It's not arithmetic in terms of the cost increases. So it is dumb that we're not doing this, unless we're never going to do it and be like I was just in the Midwest with Abby Finkenauer in Iowa, where they're tearing up paved roads because they're in bad shape and they can't afford them. So they're going back to gravel in some places. That's ridiculous.
Hello, I'm here. Peter
Yep.
Varga from Grand Rapids, Michigan, Congressman DeFazio. You talked about the discussions you had about the $2 trillion and how it came about, but really, was there any discussions about how you're going to pay for it? And then the other question to that is, what did you hear that made you think that there's major issues looming ahead for us as we do our reauthorization proposals and your discussions with it?
Well, no, we didn't. That was the next meeting, which was set 3 weeks forward, which is, okay, we're going to come back. There was a lot of dissension there were some members who were saying, well, you got to go first, to the president, and the president saying, well, you got to bring me something. And finally I said, look, how about we do it this way? We come back in 3 weeks. I said, I have a funding proposal. Everybody who has a funding proposal throws it on the table. No names, just put them on the table. And then we go through them, we discuss them, and we figure out what we can live with in terms of those funding proposals. And people go, yeah, it could work. But then, of course, the next meeting didn't happen. So that's what I proposed at that time. The Senate bill was hopeful in that it was bipartisan out of committee, and they did include, environmental titles, climate change, resilience. The numbers are way low for those things, but they did include those principles, which at this point the House Republicans in my committee won't support for the most part. So that's going to be a problem. You definitely can't use the word climate change. A number of them are willing to accept resilience, but they're much more resistant when you start talking about, electrifying the national highway network, or putting in extra money so transit districts can buy much more expensive electric buses, et cetera, et cetera. Those are going to be sticking points. They are, they're afraid of acknowledging that issue. So that's going to be a problem.
All right. Well, thank you for everything you're doing for us.
Right.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Back here.
Yep.
Rich Sampson, Southwest Transit Association. Quick question. Thank you for your continued support in growing the low no bus program, and we are appreciative of all the battery-powered electric buses out there, but smaller communities, particularly those running demand response service, we'd like to see your committee clarify for the FTA that the no side of that program still exists, and we could get some low emissions vehicles out to those smaller systems. Small vehicles just don't have battery electric capability yet. So appreciate any clarity on that, sir.
Sure. No, I'd be happy to work with you on that. So, and my portable memory unit's out here somewhere. Auka's here. He'll be up on the next panel. So he's taking notes. Yes.
Peter Ogoff with Sound Transit.
Oh, hey.
How are you?
Hey, Peter. Can't see you, but yeah, all right. I think I'm going to see you a little later.
So I think we're heading into like the third reauthorization where we're talking about transitioning to a different funding source, and I was very taken in by your notion of a national pilot on VMT. But I wonder if this would be the reauthorization where we would also potentially build the infrastructure to actually collect money nationwide that way. My concern is we'll do a 6-year bill, we'll have a national pilot on VMT, then it'll take another 6 years to actually build a federal infrastructure to collect taxes in such an alternative way. So I just wonder how ambitious you want to be in facilitating the transition in this bill.
Well, most new vehicles, and certainly electric vehicles, they're capable of being electronically tracked. And the question is, who's going to gather that data, and then how would the taxes be rendered to people? We haven't quite thoroughly worked that out yet. And again, I'd be happy to hear your ideas. And it would be great if we could do it the way they do, like, where you can go buy an Easy Pass. You can either have one in your car, which is linked to a credit card, or you can go buy one with cash. And so for people who don't want to be tracked, they go buy one with cash, and they then can go through the tolls. That's going to be a barrier. That's an issue, the privacy issue. Now, of course, they know exactly where I am right now. They might even be listening. And the New York Times did a great article earlier this year where you have apps that always run even when you've gone through and you think you've shut everything off except when you're using it. There's some things that run in background, and they track you. And but that data is all anonymized. Okay. Well, the Times went out and bought a bunch of anonymized data. Then they took the anonymized data and they overlaid it on a map using GPS. And then they could establish tracks, and they could track people exactly back to their homes. And then they got the tax maps, and they said, this person lives here, they work at this hospital, they take their kid to this daycare, and they go here. So we're all already being tracked. But there is still, in the rural parts of my district, you can track me where I drive. The government can track me, after you get the gun out of my cold dead hand. There is still a lot of that out there. So we've got to deal with that as we move, and that's part of what we would work through in a pilot. But there certainly would have to be a collection mechanism, and hopefully one that is easily expanded in the national pilot. But I'm not exactly sure how to do it. I'm not a big fan of the idea that once a year the IRS will send you a bill, which is what some people have proposed. I don't think that's going to be real popular either. You don't mind so much an increment on a daily, weekly, or maybe even a monthly basis. But if you go all year and then you get a bill and you go, oh, wait a minute. So we've got to work that through. Anybody who's got great ideas, we're open to it.
Some of us who collect motor vehicle excise taxes from every driver once a year will tell you that that's not a good idea.
Yeah, I think you had an initiative up there on that
yes,
once.
We did.
Yes,
Thanks.
Mr. Chairman, Chris Brady, back here.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, you're big enough I can see you.
Great. First of all, thanks for your interest in getting out of D.C. and getting out, frankly, the United States and go seeing what the best practices around the world are. And of course, we know you've taken your committee to Europe and to Japan and whatnot. I wanted to point out one element of APTA's recommendations for surface transportation is a very robust passenger rail bill. And I wanted to see if you didn't include it in your opening comments here because it's really kind of a transit organization, but high-speed and intercity passenger rail is an integral part of APTA here. It's part of their recommendation. So will you have a rail title?
We're definitely going to have a rail title. I can't tell you exactly the specifics of it yet, but I've been meeting with Richard Anderson, who's the relatively new head of Amtrak. He used to be at Delta Airlines, so he's trying to drag Amtrak into the 20th century. And then who knows? I mean, maybe we can even move beyond that. But he came to see me in the office. He says, you know what every conductor has? I said, Richard, I don't know. And he pulls out his iPhone. He says, I got one of these. And then he said, and he reaches here and pulls out a chain, and it has a skeleton key on it. And he says, and they have these. So he's trying to transform Amtrak. He is still saddled by a mandate I'd like to do away with. I'm sure there'll be a lot of resistance that they have to make money because he's making cuts that shouldn't be made and degrading passenger service in ways that are going to discourage people from using Amtrak. And if we could remove that mandate that he has to make money, since there's no rail system in the world that I'm aware of that makes money. Yeah, Virgin makes money in England, but guess what? The government maintains the tracks. So sure, I can run power over it, So we've got to break down that barrier. I've talked to him about higher speed rail, and I would love to see high speed rail. I got back in the 90s. I got one of the first 6 high speed rail routes designated, and in those days nobody wanted one. And it was from Eugene, Oregon to Vancouver, BC. Now Washington has made some pretty good investments and progress on this. It's still not high speed, but it's higher. Oregon hasn't. They're finally getting around to coming up with a potential route, and that's only taken 22 years. So, dealing with the railroads is hard. Getting right-of-way is hard. As we're seeing in California, greenfield projects are really hard. Is there some way we can work with and a lot of the railroads have excess right-of-way, but they're loath to give it up or alienate it in any way because, gee, someday we might need to triple track this. We've got to deal with some of those issues if we're going to make availability of high-speed rail corridors, which have to be dedicated corridors, out there. I've also, and I know you're working in one particular area of high-speed rail. I also did visit a Hyperloop outside of Las Vegas and was pretty excited by their concept too, and they're breaking ground in India. We'll see if it works, but the idea is they need less right-of-way, they can be above ground, over ground, and they can do grades that rail can't do. So I think there's some exciting potential breakthroughs here. I'm not going to choose a technology, but I would like to see, and I mean Richard would like to see, what he'd really like to do for the future of Amtrak is look at city pairs, 400 to 700 miles, where he could run trains faster and get there, as opposed to thinking we're going to have a high-speed rail network all the way across the country. There's people thinking about working on this, and again, we're open to ideas.
Great, thanks very much.
Sure. Okay, good. Looks like we exhausted the questions. All right, well, thank you all very much. I appreciate it. Thanks.
So please, let's give another round of applause to Chairman DeFazio for his leadership and thoughtful remarks. And Mr. Chairman, we truly appreciate your support for public transportation. Can't wait to get our hands on that transformative proposal. We look forward to also working with you on the next authorization bill.